we've reached herd immunity. 94% of the population now have antibodies. Why is the government continuing with its relentless antivirus policies? I thought herd immunity meant we'd beaten it.
Well, you'd like to think so, wouldn't you? I mean, we actually reached herd immunity in the adult population, according to UCH, some weeks ago. And then we had a report this week that 80% of kids have actually got antibodies as well, which you would expect because you never know when a child's got COVID most of the time. So I have no idea. And I mean, I fear, as you do, that there are zero COVID people that are guiding our government and telling them that it's achievable, and it's not achievable. And if we are going for that, we are just going to cause more and more damage to people's health by these restrictions, which are ruining lives.
I mean, that is the problem, isn't it? That if you are chasing zero COVID, as Australia is so disastrously trying to do, you are chasing an impossible dream, and we will never achieve that. And therefore, the fear is, if our government seriously is obsessed with zero COVID, these restrictions and diktats and rules and regulations will go on forever.
Well, I think so. And I mean, I must be honest with you. My sister lives in Australia, and I fear I will never see her again. And I do worry that Australia actually is headed for massive problems with COVID should they ever decide to open their doors, because a virus will do what a virus is going to do, as we've seen. And I just don't think they're going to be able to keep it out. So it's worrying. And it's even more worrying if we think that that's what's going on here, because it will just drive us all insane. It will limit freedoms to the point where it's damaging health. It won't allow us to get back to normal in any shape or form. For example, in the NHS, clearing those waiting lists that you've been talking of. It's ridiculous policy if that is the policy.
Do you get the impression, Renee, that Boris and the government keep, and perhaps Sage as well, they keep changing the goalposts? I mean, I can remember way back when they were saying, oh, well, basically you reach herd immunity at about 60% of the population having antibodies. Then that kept going up and up and up. And that you said that UCL or UCH said that we'd reached it a couple of weeks ago, but they did say last week we were at 87% of the population with antibodies, and that when we reached 93, that was definitely herd immunity. And in fact, we reached that 2 days ago. We're now at 94%. They keep changing the goalposts. Perhaps they're going to turn around and say 100% next.
Well, I mean, there is a problem in certain viruses that herd immunity is difficult to predict in terms of its level. And when you get a new variant that's much more infective, that Delta has been for sure, then I think the level for herd immunity goes up. But I think it's even more fundamental than that, Kevin, because if you go back to the time in, I think, December, January, where we were told that 15 million vaccines into the arms of those who are most likely to die from COVID, and then we would all be free. And then it wasn't just 15, it was then by age. And then that age came down and down and down. And now it's coming down even lower into our kids. The goalposts are moving week in and week out. And it's very sad. And it's really quite dispiriting to have a goal which is constantly moved until it comes to the point where basically everyone, including your cat, will be vaccinated, which seems to be the goal.
Should we be vaccinating kids? I know that at the moment the sort of barrier stops at the age of 16, but there's definite talk that the government wants 12-year-olds to be vaccinated. Should we be doing that?
No, I don't think we should be vaccinating 16 and 17-year-olds either. I mean, what we have to realise is that with any new medication that we use as a doctor, we know that there are immediate side effects, short-term side effects and long-term side effects. We thought that AstraZeneca was safe, and then we discovered there was a clotting issue. So we modified our behaviour and who could have that vaccine. We thought that mRNA vaccines were safe for children, and then we started to see in America and Israel myocarditis. And it varies on how many the estimates are, but anywhere between 10 and 60 per million kids. Now, when you bear in mind that children really don't suffer from COVID, their risk of dying from COVID is 2 in a million. It's almost zero. It's not zero, but it's almost zero. Long COVID in children really doesn't happen very much. There was a massive study yesterday. So I think it's time for us to protect our children, not use them as a shield to protect us. And we have to remember that we have time on children, because it's not like a vulnerable adult who could die from COVID. If the risk is tiny, and and actually more children are dying from driving in cars or drowning in ponds, but we don't stop them, driving in cars, then we have time to sit back and look at the long-term data. But to look at long-term data, Kevin, we need some long-term. So we need a couple of years of data to see whether or not it's safe. I am an absolute supporter of vaccines for children. When the diseases that we are protecting against, like measles, can kill children, then of course vaccines are a no-brainer and we should all do it. But we know nothing about this vaccine in the long term for children, and there are risks. Myocarditis is inflammation of the heart. Why would you do that to your child if getting COVID is unlikely to do anything to them?
I mean, going forward, what exactly do you think this government is up to? I mean, are they pursuing a zero COVID policy? Because the point is, what I've heard is that Boris and the gang and Sage, although the Delta variant is pretty much under control and actually wasn't quite as bad as people predicted it might have been, at least in this country, that they fear a new variant might come along to cause lots and lots of problems. But we cannot make policies based on what might happen in the future. As I said last night on this show, I said, well, that's like saying, issuing a government diktat telling everyone to go and live in a nuclear bomb shelter in case another country drops a nuclear bomb on us in 2 months' time. You can't do that, can you?
No, absolutely not. And look, we've seen that the vaccine rollout has been amazing. And for the vulnerable who we know were going to die if they got COVID or very likely to, we seem to have, in the main, broken that link so that we've had high cases and low deaths. And every death is tragic, of course. But we need to reach a point where we say, OK, we've done everything that we can possibly do to minimize deaths from this disease. We now need to live a life, because otherwise the health and manifestations, the bad health manifestations of not living a life and not being able to treat people and not be able to get the waiting list down are even worse long term. We have 700,000 more families living in poverty, and we know that poverty breeds ill health. We have to start living like it's flu.
You're right.
I know it's not flu, but we have to try.
And also, as the former Supreme Court Judge Jonathan Sumption said the other day, there is more to life than being afraid of dying. And you're right, we've got to choose life again. It is really getting absurd. I don't understand what the government's up to. Renee, thank you so much for your time. Dr. Renee Hoenderkamp there. I'm Kevin O'Sullivan, and this is the home and the zone of free speech and common sense. Talk Radio.